Welcome back. We're continuing our conversation with Lindsay Smith and Tina Stern, and thanks for sticking around with us, ladies. So when someone has a disease or illness and their friends and family are trying to be supportive, do you recommend that they also learn about the disease or illness that their loved one has, or what's your recommendation there?
So our recommendation is typically that if the patient is wanting for the family or friends to have more information in regard to the disease process or the diagnosis, we first and foremost ask the patient for permission. And typically what I'll do is involve a nurse who really has a medical understanding of the diagnosis, and yet I can provide the psychosocial support. And we'll have a meeting together with the patient, the family member, or the friend, and really so that we can provide robust material and provide that support that may be needed not only for the patient but for the loved one as well.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And in addition to learning about the condition, do you also talk about how they can help take care of the person who has that disease or condition?
So typically yes, and that's where it's beneficial to have a nurse along with the social worker so that we can work hand in hand, not only to discuss for the caregiver how they can take care of themselves, both emotionally and physically, but also what are going to be the potential needs of the patient physically and emotionally.
Okay, great. And so then how important would you say it is for a caregiver to make sure that he or she is taking care of him or herself as well as the patient?
Oh, absolutely, very important. Self-care is a big component of that, because in order to care for someone else, you need to be healthy too, emotionally and physically, to be able to be a good caregiver for that loved one.
And are there generally support groups that help with that, either for the patient or the caregiver or both, or how do people get that support that they need?
There are caregiver support groups. Some are held through the hospital or the healthcare system. Rocky Mountain Development Council is, again, a good resource for some of those services, and even has the ability to offer respite care to help patients when families are unable to.
How about those folks who may not live very close to a hospital or some of those resources? Any advice on how they might be able to seek out support?
So with our online resources nowadays, there are several apps and websites that any social worker can direct the patient to. There's also a program called Immerman Angels for individuals who have a cancer diagnosis. It's a mentor program, and the mentor is actually provided over the phone, and it's somebody who has a similar diagnosis who's able to share their experience, strength, and hope, and be able to relate to that individual.
That's awesome. And so we've been talking a lot about the emotional support. What about when it comes to actually treating or caring for the disease or the condition? Because that can be a lifestyle change, doing things completely different than they've done before. How do you support people in making those changes so they stick to what they're supposed to be doing with their care?
Lifestyle changes are the biggest thing and big barrier for people that they run into, because those lifestyle changes are difficult. Changes in nutrition, changes in functional ability, and just taking your time, taking it step by step, and recognizing, okay, if I have to change 5 things with my diet, it's okay to start with 1 and then work on the next one. And then functional limitations, just learning to recognize that your mobility might be impaired, but there might be ways that you can modify or work around that so that you're still independent, or as independent as you can be.
And you sort of alluded to this earlier about people saying, I don't want to be pampered today. Are there times when the friends, the family, that support system can get a little overbearing, and how do you handle that kind of a situation?
Absolutely, absolutely. There are times, I have plenty of patients who have said, I don't want to hurt my family members' feelings. I don't want to, they're doing so much for me, but this is too much. And so typically we'll sit down and go over some verbiage about how it's okay to say no. And it's okay to tell your family member, thank you so much for all that you're doing for me. Today, I just want a day for me. And really going over that, my needs and expectations may change from day to day given where I'm at with how I'm feeling. And so just being very clear and open and honest with the loved one or caregiver or family member or friend.
Okay, great. That's good advice. And I would imagine too, at some point the conversation, depending on the condition or the disease, would turn to end of life conversations and what happens there. So how do you support that whole process, and any advice you would give for folks who find themselves in that situation?
Talking about, there's so many different options when it comes to those conversations, and just supporting them where they're at with the current stage that they're in with their illness and what they're experiencing, and just providing that emotional support in the way of supportive listening and empathy, but also just making sure that they know all of the different options that they have available to them. It doesn't have to look one way or be the same as someone else has experienced. There's hospice, there's palliative care, there's continuing treatments, all kinds of different ways that they could look at it and decide what's best for them moving forward.
So we are almost out of time. Any closing thoughts or things you want to make sure, maybe something we haven't touched on or you want to make sure people really heard before we go?
I think just know that in the community, social workers are available. In the majority of hospitals, social workers are available. And so if somebody is needing or wanting to speak with a social worker, to ask.
Okay, perfect. Okay, perfect. Ladies, thank you so much for your time and your expertise. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thank you to Chelsea as well for sharing her story. That's all we have. See you next week. And in the meantime, stay fit, stay well, and stay healthy for life with Healthy Living for Life. We'll see you next week.
Healthy Living for Life is brought to you by Mountain Pacific Quality Health. We'd love to hear from you. If you have suggestions for future programs, visit our website at mpqhf.org or call us at 406-443-4020. You can also catch us on YouTube by visiting our website and clicking on the YouTube icon. Special thanks to Fire Tower Coffee House and Roasters. Production facilities provided by Video Express Productions.